Yeah, what's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Format Podcast. You know who it is, Bruce Hope, your host, and I'm here to talk about NFL Week One. You know it had to be coming. Got to talk about the NFL. NFL is king in this country. We know that of all the sports, NFL is king. We've had some really exciting action. We're finally back to it. I know for all us football fans, we've been waiting all summer. So week one is in the books, and we're definitely going to discuss that. I'm going to talk about the six most interesting games to me, because obviously there were 16 games in week one. Can't talk about them all, or this would be like a 10-hour pod. But I'm gonna talk about the six most interesting games to me and kind of what I thought was interesting and what really got my attention about them. Before I get to that, I will briefly talk a little bit about college football and some things that also have my attention on that front. But before we get to all that, you know what time it is. Let's go ahead and knock out the particulars, shall we? So if you're listening on YouTube, of course, thank you for checking in. You obviously know what we are. We are the Format Podcast. If somebody sent you the link or whatever and you're interested in finding it, go ahead and type in the search bar, the Format Podcast. We should pop right up. Do me a favor, click that subscribe button in the lower right corner of your screen. Also, click the like button for me, please. And click that bell so you can be notified when new content comes out. And you can always be on it when I drop a new pod for you, okay? Um, Next up, if you're on social media, you can definitely reach out to me on Twitter, and the address is at Bruce F A Hope. That's at Bruce F A Hope. Instagram at The Format Podcast, at The Format Podcast. You can also email me directly, The Format Podcast at Outlook.com, The Format Podcast at Outlook.com. You can tell me you love the show, tell me you hate the show. I enjoy the interaction. I don't care. Just, whatever it is, let me know. Also, if there's any topics you want me to hit that I may have missed, you tell me where I'm right, tell me where I'm wrong, tell me if you think I'm an idiot, tell me if you think I'm a genius. It's all good. Just go ahead, drop those lines, all right? As well, you can find me wherever you get your audio podcast. If you're just looking for the audio version of the show, Google, Spotify, Podbean, Stitcher, Overcast, iTunes, all that good stuff. Wherever you get your podcast, we can find it. Just type in the Format Podcast and we'll pop up right there. Okay. Also, wherever you are on the audio podcast, if you can, please go ahead and leave a comment and rate, especially on iTunes. Give us that 5-star rating. Really appreciate it. Helps the algorithm. I don't know exactly how because that's not my lane, but it is good. All right. And it helps us pop up faster in the search engine for you next time you pop it in. And it helps us come up more quickly on the sports podcast list for other people looking for a good pod to listen to. All right. So, yeah, I guess that's about it. Sit back, relax, and listen up to episode 105 of The Format. All right, so NFL Week One is in the books, and what a week one it was! A lot of interesting things going on. Probably too much for me to go through all of them, so I'll probably just touch on maybe the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games that were the most interesting to me. But a lot of really neat things going on. Finally got the season underway. You gotta love that. Everything that's happening. We waited all summer for that since what, February, if you're a football fan or an NFL fan, I should say. So it's all there. A lot going on, a lot of things to touch on. Before we get to that, let me briefly throw out a couple interesting things about the college football season. So what's the number one for me? I think I think it's pretty much a wrap for the college football season. Why do I say that? I think it's about time. I know it's only week two. This is going to sound ridiculous. I am not an SEC guy. If you listen to this pod or watch this pod, then you know that. No question about it. But I think I'm going to go ahead and crown Alabama repeat national champion again right now. Um, I saw Ohio State as probably the only team outside of the SEC, and Georgia the only team in it, but Ohio State probably being the only team that even had a chance against Alabama in terms of having the elite skill talent and probably uh, physically being able to match up with Bama and maybe being able to round into shape by the time the playoff rolls around. And they still may get there if they win the Big 12 convincingly, Big 10, excuse me, convincingly the rest of the way. But Michigan is looking like they may be a different team, but we've seen Michigan look really good before and still get curb stomped by Ohio State. But that's a different story. But Ohio State was the team from outside that I really thought might have had a chance against Bama. And well, we saw what happened to them. They got physically bullied and beaten up the other day by Oregon. So that probably, and well, not probably, in my estimation, it shows that they don't have what it takes, at least not this season, to beat Alabama. So from here, I am going to go ahead and crown premature. It may be, but I'm going to go ahead and crown Alabama as the 2021-22 college football national champions. The machine just keeps rolling. It is, I guess the word I'm going to have to use is phenomenal how they never rebuild. They just retool and keep going. Saban loses coordinators, doesn't matter. He gets another one. Saban loses a ton of players to the NFL. It doesn't matter. He just gets more. His O-line coach is a former NFL head coach, Doug Marrone, formerly the Jacksonville Jaguars. His freaking OC is a former head coach, division-winning head coach multiple times at that, Bill O'Brien, who also was an OC for Tom Brady with Bill Belichick. So it's just amazing the amount and the high level of coaching that these Crimson Tide players are getting on the collegiate level, which is why they're able to consistently win. So you combine talent with high level coaching. And of course, Saban is a former head coach himself and arguably the greatest college football coach of all time. If there's any argument for that, it's either gone or very, very close to disappearing. So anyway, I got that, especially after Ohio State getting upset at the shoe by Oregon this past weekend. First time Ryan Day has lost a regular season game as the coach of Ohio State. I think he was like 22-0 until this point. So a great way to start out, but all good things must come to an end. USC, Clay Helton got fired. I think that was probably long in coming. Like that should have happened a while ago, but that's just me. And there may be some bias there because I'm a Notre Dame fan. So I don't want anything good for USC. But just speaking objectively on the journalist side and on the sports talking head side, USC has too many resources. They have too much talent in their own backyard, being the Southern California area and just the state of California on the whole, which is where the majority of the talent in the Pac-12 comes from, and a whole bunch of NFL quarterbacks. And they're still not able to, number one, recruit the way they should, and number two, win the way they should with everything at their disposal. So Clay Helton's gone. I will be very, very interested to see who is going to be in line for that job at the end of this year. One of the names I heard thrown out that could be very interesting is Luke Fickell, the former defensive coordinator at Ohio State under Urban Meyer, who's now the Cincinnati head coach and has brought them to being one of, if not the best team in the group of five. He's an outstanding defensive coach, a really solid recruiter, although he had the benefit of getting a lot of recruiting help from Marcus Freeman, who's now the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. But regardless, Luke Fickell is a name that I heard thrown around that could be really interesting. I think he could do some probably pretty good things if he ends up out there in the Pac-12 with those type of resources available and those type of athletes and that type of speed literally in his backyard. So that would be interesting. I think we just got to sit back and kind of see, number one, how USC finishes out his season, how this affects its recruiting class, and then who they hire eventually to take that head coaching job. Oregon is now undefeated so far in the season, again, only 2-0, but probably, right there with LSU getting beat by UCLA, the biggest win of the season, certainly the biggest for the Pac-12. maybe the biggest for the Pac-12 in a few years. Them going to the shoe and physically beating and then beating on the scoreboard Ohio State. So Oregon looking like one of the better teams in the country. We will see how they end up playing out the season. Do they make the college football playoff? If they do make the college football playoff, what can they do? Again, Alabama's a machine. I don't see anyone beating them. Based on what we saw in game one, Georgia versus Clemson, maybe Oregon Clemson is a really great matchup. Who knows? But we got a lot of games to play, a lot of time to wait, a lot of things to see. So really interesting. I can't get through a college football segment without mentioning Notre Dame fighting Irish. So Notre Dame scrapes by, and I mean scrapes by Toledo, one of the better teams, if not the best team in the MAC. How do I say this without being disrespectful? Toledo is a really good team. They're obviously well coached. They have talent for the level that they're on, but they do not have talent comparatively to Notre Dame, and they should not have been in that game in position to win the way they were. I am not going to break down that game. If you want a really good breakdown of that game, you can listen to the Shamrock podcast with Pete Sampson and Matt Fortuna. Really good pod, talking Notre Dame football. Or you can listen to my guy, John Kennedy. I've mentioned him before, and he's been on the show, host of the Always Irish Notre Dame football podcast. Very, very objective show. If you're looking for a guy to just go on there and wax poetic about Notre Dame football, John is not your guy. He's going to give it to you straight. So he's going to break that game down in detail. But regardless, when you look at Notre Dame, a lot of talent first went to the NFL this past year. 9 guys drafted. I mentioned that in the previous pods. Tied with Georgia for second most in college football in this past draft. So really good, but a lot of talent walked out of the door. Interesting. Notre Dame not nearly as sound on the offensive line as they have been in past years. That moniker of O-line U is really being tested. Jack Cohn, starting quarterback, got sacked 6 times on Saturday. Tough. Still having a lot of problems trying to run the football. Not nearly as physical up front as they have been in past years. We'll see if they can get that worked out. Marcus Freeman, the ballyhooed incoming defensive coordinator from Cincinnati, his defense is getting gashed, and they've given up more 60-yard plays in the 2 games this season than they gave up in 3 years under former defensive coordinator and now head coach at Vanderbilt, Clark Lee. So just some things to keep your eye on. And the final thing I want to mention, without getting too deep into Notre Dame, 4-star freshman quarterback Tyler Buckner, who coincidentally, we were just talking about this, is out of Southern California. He actually got into the game much earlier in the season than expected, got quality reps, really showed the ability to make plays in the option run game and in the RPO game. Kind of a lot like Ian Book in the past in terms of being able to make plays with his legs. However, he's bigger physically than Ian Book, showed a lot of speed when he got out of there, but he also was able to make some big time throws, right? So it's interesting. I think he's definitely the future, and I love the fact that he is able to make the plays with his feet, but also really, really sling it. So that to me bodes well if he's going to be the guy, because Notre Dame is going to need a difference maker at that position going forward, especially next year opening up at the Shoe in Columbus, facing Ohio State, and then having to travel later in the season to Clemson. So both in the 22 and 23 seasons, Notre Dame has Ohio State and Clemson. So tough matchups. Anyway, overall, college football going to be interesting. Florida plays Bama this week. I don't think that's going to be very much of a test for Alabama. I think they will just keep on rolling. See what I did there? Roll Tide. I think they're just going to keep on rolling. I don't expect anything to really get in their way this season. Georgia is going to be able to physically match up with Bama, one of the few teams that can. But at the end of the day, coaching is going to make the difference. And Kirby Smart, while he's very good, just isn't good enough to outcoach Saban. I can't see it. And I can't see a Saban coach team really making enough mistakes for Kirby Smart, to become the first former assistant to beat Nick Saban going head to head. So that's that. Talking college football. Try to keep that brief. We'll have another show maybe next week or a little later in the season, really kind of getting more into college football, seeing, where we are, where things lay. It's pretty early. I don't really like kind of doing the rankings and all that because you don't know what these teams are 2 weeks in. There's very few teams that you can just kind of see what they are, know where they'll go, and how they'll end up. Obviously Bama's one, and this year Bama might be the only one that you can kind of see as clearly far and away the best of the pack. All right. Okay, let's go to the NFL. So obviously, what, the 30 teams, 32 teams, sorry. So 16 games on opening weekend. Too many for me to really get into. I'm just going to talk about 6 of those games, right? The ones that I found to be the most interesting. So let's start here. Bears and Rams on Sunday night. So that was an interesting game to watch. Not necessarily because it was the most competitive, but kind of some of the things that we were talking about and looking forward to getting into that game. So first, a lot of hype on both sides, but kind of for different reasons. Well, I guess kind of for similar reasons. Main thing being you have two quarterbacks coming into new situations. Obviously, for the Chicago Bears, you have draft pick Justin Fields, who basically the question is for most people, when is he going to get in there? Because he shows all world talent. He's big, he's strong, he's very mobile, very fast, has a rocket arm, can make all the throws. The biggest thing is in the preseason, kind of took the longest to see plays and make throws. He had the longest time on average of all the quarterbacks in the preseason holding the ball. So that's something that wasn't an issue at Ohio State. He kind of always had the time to be able to do that for the most part. But obviously in the NFL, you don't have that long. The pass rush is too ferocious. Guys are always coming. There's blitzes coming. The front fours on most teams are dangerous. So he's got to learn to get rid of that ball quicker. In the interim, kind of before he learns how to figure out, really recognize what he's seeing faster, make decisions more quickly, he has the mobility as his main ability, right? So that's going to help him get out of a lot of trouble. And then he's able to make, pinpoint throws while on the move, as well as pinpoint throws from the pocket. So a lot of hype in Chicago in terms of Justin Fields. But the biggest question with him is not what's he going to do, how good is he going to be? It's more, when is he going to play, right? Because Andy Dalton was brought in. He was promised a starting job. As we know, he was the starter week 1. He was in there. Justin Fields got a few plays in the game, but Andy Dalton was the guy. And overall, pretty pedestrian game by him, right? 27 of 38. So not bad completion percentage, but 206 yards, very pedestrian. 1 interception, no touchdowns. A lot of really short throws, a lot of stuff to the flat, a lot of short passes. So nothing really dangerous in terms of going down the field. See, the thing about Andy Dalton that works in Chicago is that he's a veteran. He's not going to make a lot of mistakes. If the team is playing well overall, the defense is working. If everything is working for him, he can be a solid quarterback. He's not going to lose you a lot of games. He has a lot of experience with, being in Cincinnati all those years. So he's a guy that can, he can manage it. He can do a lot of things, right? He clearly does not have the physical tools or the upside of Justin Fields. And another thing I like about Justin Fields, he's from Georgia, but he played his college ball, most of it anyway, at Ohio State. So he knows what it is to be in the cold, to play in the cold, to throw in the cold, to deal with the wind. He's got the big arm that can do that, and that's definitely something that you will need being in Chicago, right? So he's not going to suffer from that. Andy Dalton, I'm not going to say he has a noodle arm, but that term, the red rifle, that nickname that he got while he was in college at TCU, it doesn't quite fit. I wouldn't go as far as to call him the beige water pistol like Colin Cowherd of Fox Sports 1 calls him, but he definitely doesn't have the arm to be able to cut through and deal with it when that wind is swirling in Chicago, aka the Windy City. So again, it's not how good will the Bears be? It's not what's Andy Dalton going to do. It's very simply uh, when is Justin Fields going to play? All right. On the other side, the hype there is clear, and it was clear from the moment it happened. All right. So let's go back a little bit. A few years ago, Sean McVay, the genius, the wonder boy, the offensive guy, he did a great job coaching up his Rams. And he took that team with Jared Goff all the way to the Super Bowl, where they got undressed in a master defensive class by Bill Belichick. And I think they lost 13-3. That was if I'm remembering correctly, the fifth highest scoring offense in NFL history. And they were able to score 3 points against Bill Belichick's defense. Obviously, that was the year Brady won his sixth Super Bowl. So, geez, I forgot his name already. Not Stafford. I'm so sorry. Jared Goff. Thank you. Former number one pick, Jared Goff. He was the quarterback there, but Sean McVay kind of became, I guess I'll use the word, disillusioned with him. His inability to kind of make the athletic play and not necessarily have the arm talent to really stretch the field and make the offense as dangerous as McVay would have liked it. So what I guess McVay kind of had to limit what he could call because of Jared Goff's tools or lack thereof, right? So the hype comes in when Jared Goff gets traded to Detroit for Matt Stafford, a guy who's put up big numbers year in, year out through most of his career, but hasn't had the wins. I think he's only been to the playoffs once, and he didn't win that game, right? So he doesn't have any playoff wins, I think, in 10 years in the league. But when you're looking at Stafford, a lot of GMs, a lot of front office people, a lot of coaches feel they think really highly of him around the league in terms of he's got a huge arm, he's relatively mobile, he's relatively durable. They say he's a really smart player. He understands the game of football extremely well, like a really good football mind. We're going to find out. Unless you're a diehard NFC North fan, or, most people didn't get a lot of opportunity to really watch the Lions because they were so bad for most of Stafford's tenure there. But now he's in LA. So basically what kind of the consensus, the feeling is that Sean McVay can unlock that Rams offense completely. And really, you saw that on full display on Sunday night. Stafford was 20 of 26 in that game for 321 yards, 3 touchdowns. And he just looked great. Okay. From the opening play, he rolls out, uncorks it for like a 60-yard bomb. It wasn't a touchdown, but it just shows the type of plays that McVay can call with confidence, knowing that Stafford has the ability to make those plays. He can make the off schedule. He's got the big arm. He can really go down the field. They can really stretch and move the pocket, the boots, the waggles, all those kind of things. So you have just a completely new dimension, and the Super Bowl hopes are now rekindled for the Rams. Obviously, they have one of the best defenses in the league. I think best defense overall last year. So with a great defense, you got Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. You got a really great defense overall. And then now you really unlock the offense with a guy who is, despite the lack of winning, generally perceived as an elite passer in this league. It's going to be very interesting. Now, the problem is the NFC West is arguably the best division in football. You got the Cardinals, who we'll talk about in a few minutes. You have the Niners and you have the Seahawks. So you've got a lot of tough teams. You've got some really good defenses there. 3 really good defenses. Some very good coaches. Shanahan, McVay, obviously Pete Carroll, who's a champion, and then I'm not sure about Cliff Kingsbury yet. We'll talk about him as well, but he had an outstanding debut as well. Well, not a debut in the league, but a debut this season in a year where he might possibly end up or be on the hot seat already, if the Cardinals don't have a better year or maybe even make the playoffs. But we'll get to that. So, just to kind of recap that, obviously the Rams won, big game on Sunday night. Matt Stafford played tremendously well. Andy Dalton was pedestrian. So again, if you're talking Bears, the main thing you're waiting for is, when are we going to see Justin Fields replace Andy Dalton as a starter? Dalton, he has to know his days are numbered. He's going to do his best to prepare. He's going to do his best to play as well as he can, but he just doesn't have it to compete with the young Lions. So it's only a matter of time. All right. Second game that I really enjoyed during this weekend, Cleveland Browns, Kansas City Chiefs, rematch of the divisional round of the AFC playoffs last year. This was an incredible game. And the main thing I took from it, and this is something I knew before, but just want to reiterate, when you're playing the Chiefs, no lead is safe. There's no safe lead because these guys, Patrick Mahomes can make any throw. He's got all the weapons and they can score so quickly. Andy Reid is just such a tremendous play caller. They are going to do what they do, and there's just no lead that's safe. So if you're Cleveland, the Cleveland Browns, you can look at this two ways. All right. Cleveland comes into this season really high expectations. The team is loaded on offense, team's loaded on defense. They have the reigning coach of the year and Kevin Stefanski. They have two former number one overall draft picks as opposite defensive ends, so they could really get after the pass rusher. They shored up the secondary. They have really good linebacker play. Like, there's really nothing missing from this team. The question that most people have is, can Baker Mayfield guide this team over the top? So let's talk about it a little bit. Cleveland can look at this, as I said, two ways. Number one, Cleveland can be hopeful. All right. We know there's no moral victories in the NFL or in pro sports, really, but they can be hopeful because they can look at this and say, hey, a handful of plays go the other way, we win this game. This is a team that we've played twice. Our last two games, we played against them, and we played them pretty much down to the wire. We have shown that we can play with these guys, but pretty much down to the wire, showing we can play with them is a different thing from showing we can beat them, right? So they can be hopeful, saying, okay, we can match up with them. We can punch them in the mouth. We can get a lead. We can hold on to it. We can play these guys right down to the end. Okay, that's way number one. The second way they can look at it is the other side of the coin. They can say, our last two games, we've played these guys twice now. We've been this close, and we couldn't get the job done. Like, no matter what we do, are we good enough to beat these guys? And now, if they look at it that way and that doubt starts creeping in, then what do you do? If you have to see him again, mentally, you could be up on him. You could be prepared to go ahead and close that thing out. Then the doubt starts creeping in, and you say, oh boy, we're just waiting for the dam to break, and the explosion's going to come, and the points are going to start pouring in. And then what can we do? We can't stop them once they get going, and then we won't be able to finish it out at the end, even if we kind of hold them off. That's the second way they can look at it. So I think it depends, obviously, on the mental makeup of Coach Stefanski, as well as the mental makeup of Baker Mayfield and the rest of his teammates, on whether or not Cleveland is going to be able to beat the Chiefs. Now, the Chiefs, they get, on the flip side, they're saying, hey, we beat this team the last two times we played them. Yeah, they're good, but we can beat them. It doesn't matter what their lead is. We can always come back. We have Patma Holmes, arguably the best quarterback, arguably maybe even the best player in the league. We got that guy. We have an elite receiving core. We have one of the best wide receivers. We have one of the best, if not the best, tight end. We have, arguably the best play calling head coach. I mean, we've got it all. 2 years ago, we won the championship. 1 year ago, we were in the Super Bowl. This is a team that knows what it takes to win those games when they're in those tough spots. They know how to go ahead and make something happen and then close it out. So they're kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum from Cleveland, where Cleveland is hoping they can get it done. Kansas City knows they can get it done. So I mentioned Baker Mayfield already. Baker played about as well as possible under the circumstances, okay? Completing 21 of 28 passes for 321 yards, really good numbers, except no touchdowns, but that's okay because they were able to run the ball in. And one interception, a very costly interception at the very end of the game when Cleveland was on its last possession driving to try and get the win. Baker gets tripped up. He's being pressured, kind of gets out of the pocket, gets tripped up, and then throws the ball up, and it's intercepted. And those are plays you can't make. Either you eat the sack or you throw it out of bounds, which is what I believe he was attempting to do, is throw it out of bounds. But it doesn't matter what he was attempting to do. He ends up throwing the pick and losing that game for his team. So this is something that he's got to learn that he can't do. And even besides that, what a lot of people are saying is clearly this is why maybe you don't give Baker the kind of money that he's looking for, even though he's a former number one pick. He is not a guy that can get you over the top where Pat Mahomes clearly is, and that's the difference between the two of them. Now, I don't know kind of where I necessarily fall on the line with that. I like Baker. I think he's a very competent quarterback. I think he's a leader. I think he's got the tools to get it done. What I do think is interesting, everyone says that everything that Cleveland does is based off of the run and all of that. But while Cleveland had a very solid game running the football on Sunday, they didn't have an outstanding game running the football. They ran for a total of 153 rushing yards, which is good, very good, not great. That 153 came from their entire team, and not one player on Cleveland rushed for 90 yards. Okay, so the 153 was a concerted team effort. Again, good, not great. So it's not necessarily like Baker was, riding the running game and just, threw for 200 yards and kind of managed it. He made a lot of key throws, again, until the very end when he threw the pick. You can't make excuses for that. He has to know better. Like I said, eat that sack or throw it away, which once more, I think maybe he was trying to do, but maybe he just doesn't, in that position, going down to the ground, possess the kind of arm strength like a Mahomes to really, get that out of bounds from where he was. But this is something that he must learn from if he wants to be that guy, if he wants to get paid like that guy, if he wants to win like that guy, he must make those plays if he wants himself and Cleveland as a team to be elite, because right now he's not there. He's good, but not elite. What do we say about Patma Holmes? Nothing. We know what Patma Holmes is. He's an MVP. He's a Super Bowl MVP. He's a Super Bowl champion. He is, if he's not the best player in football, the best quarterback in football, he's a top 5 player in football. That simple. All right. Next game, Cardinals and Titans. This is one I found really interesting in terms of how it played out. The Cardinals beat the Titans 38-13. Why is that so interesting? The Titans were in the AFC Championship last year where they lost to the Chiefs. They were one game away from the Super Bowl, and they just got blasted to open up. Now, we know what you did last year doesn't mean anything this year, but for the most part, that's the same team, and they added a guy who's going to be a Hall of Fame wide receiver in Julio Jones. It didn't look like it did much in this first game. All right, so you look at it, the Cards destroyed them 38-13 in this game, basically shut Derrick Henry down after 2,000 rushing yards last year, 2,000 plus. He had 17 carries for 56 yards in this game. Ryan Tannehill looked very, very pedestrian, 21 of 35 on the day, 212 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. I mean, not terrible, but, nothing special, right? So the question now here becomes, Falcons head coach, former Tennessee Titans offensive coordinator Arthur Smith. How much is he missed in Tennessee? Is it the play calling? Is it the play design? How much did they change up what they're doing? Although I can't imagine that you would change up too much of what you're doing. Obviously, you horse Derrick Henry. You put it in his gut 20 plus times a game. You use the play action, and even still, just because of his presence there, the box is almost always going to be stacked. You had A.J. Brown having a great year last year, and then you spread the field even more in terms of what defenses can and cannot do, because you've got Julio Jones on the other side. So basically, you have 2 number 1 receivers. You have an all-pro running back. What should be difficult to do offensively? But like I said, Derrick Henry got shut down. We did not see big games from either one of those number 1 wide receivers, being A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. Just not sure what was going on there. Again, is it that they're missing Arthur Smith? Is it that they're kind of, again, game 1, but is it that they're trying to get a hold on what's what and kind of who fits where and what's going on in the game action? Who knows? It's going to be interesting to see what they're able to do for the rest of the year. And it serves as a quick note, Arthur Smith did not do well in his opener as a Falcons head coach. They lost 2, but talk about that another time. Ryan Tannehill, he had the best stretch of his career with Arthur Smith. Obviously, it started off pretty badly without him, which again is so odd, because you have, if you're Ryan Tannehill, what most quarterbacks would kill for, you have 3 all pros at your skill positions, right? So, what's the issue here? Is it play calling, or is it the play of the players? So, yeah, I guess we're gonna have to see some more, but this is gonna be very interesting, very interesting. Next game, the opener of the season opener, Thursday night. Who else would it be? The Dallas Cowboys, which let me just take a second to say this is so amazing to me what marketing does. Marketing is so powerful, right? Years ago, the Dallas Cowboys marketed themselves as America's team. Um, and somehow they managed to keep that moniker. I thought America didn't like losers. I thought America was about winners. You look at the Cowboys; they get more prime time and game of the week spots than anyone else, but they're not winning. They haven't had a championship since 1995. Like, how is this still happening? But I digress. Opening game, Cowboys versus Bucks. Great storylines there. Dak Prescott obviously returning from major injury. Tom Brady obviously returning from record-setting 7th Super Bowl. Now, I know you've heard this before, but Tom Brady has more championships by himself than any other franchise. Any argument that this guy is not the GOAT, I mean, that's just arguing for the sake of argument. there's no other reason. But anyway, this is not about that. The point is, it was a great game overall. So you saw Dak Prescott picked up right where he left off last year, over 400 yards passing. Great outing, but they lost. The Cowboys lost. So as Shannon Sharp likes to say, empty calories, empty calories. And so you got to wonder, like, at what point is Kellen Moore, the Cowboys offensive coordinator, Jerry Jones, Cowboys head coach, the whole Cowboys organization, Mike McCarthy, their head coach, Jerry Jones, the owner, at what point are they going to realize as an organization that they're not going to win if they don't utilize balance or if they don't get back to Zeke being Zeke, right? So I know the offensive line is not what it was during Zeke's first 2 years, but it's still good enough, right? What do I always say? If you watch this show, you know what it is. Run the ball, stop the run. I get it. It's not sexy. I get it. You want to see it all over the yard. If you're Kellen Moore, you want to show your offensive genius by having a head coach that's, by having a quarterback that's throwing it everywhere and lighting the scoreboards up and putting up huge numbers, because that's more likely to get you a head coaching job. How about as an OC, you get a head coaching job by calling plays and winning? Because all this flashy play by Dak Prescott, where are the wins to show for it? They don't win when he plays this way and puts up all these numbers. And Dak knows it. He knows it. He said as much. But at the end of the day, I mean, I got to wonder, where was Zeke in this game and why? Was it a function of the Bucks defense, which is one of the best run Ds, if not the best run D in the league last year, and they've got all 11 defensive starters back? Was it about Kellen Moore, who I just talked about, and his play calling? Is it, passing looks better and the run game is not sexy? It could be all of that. But guess what, though? A few years ago, when the Cowboys were 13-3 and getting number 1, number 2 seed in the playoffs, how were they doing it? Zeke was pounding the rock and Dak was playing off of that. Now, when they switch it up and they want Dak to be the guy and throw it 1,000 times a game for 1,000 yards a game, well, you see the outcome. This seems so simple to me. What is it? Run the ball, stop the run. Say it with me. Run the ball, stop the run. One more time. Run the ball, stop the run. Not hard, not hard. So if you're the Cowboys, you better get this figured out. If you are the Bucks, Super Bowl champs, you didn't play as great as you could have. I think you had 4 turnovers in that game, 2 picks by Brady. One of the picks wasn't really a big deal. It was the Hail Mary at the end of the game trying to win. Another one, he throws the ball out to the flat to Leonard Fournette. Fournette doesn't catch it, bobbles it, pops it up in the air, and the Cowboys come down with the pick. So I mean, 2 picks are 2 picks. Obviously Brady would love to have those back, but I don't kill him for that. Then there were a couple of fumbles, right? So 4 turnovers overall, the Bucks still win. So that's sloppy. They got some things to clean up. And Brady and Arians are going to be all over that. But at the end of the day, they still won. They have all their Super Bowl starters returning. They have a tremendous amount of talent. And of course, they have the GOAT running the show offensively along with Byron Leftwich. So you're in a really good position if you're the Bucks, and I don't think you have much to worry about. Saying whether or not they'll repeat, it's so hard to win in the NFL. We know that. It's so hard to repeat. Obviously, injuries play a huge role. And then, when you're the champs, every game is the Super Bowl for the opposing team because they want to say, hey, I knocked off the champs, right? So there's that. So, we will definitely see what's what as the season goes on. I know I've said that about a million times on this pod already so far, but week one just finished. So we gotta have some time to see what happens. Again, I'm not saying he's a bum, but I've never believed in Dak in terms of giving him all that money. I think Jerry Jones was really stupid to do it. And when that money really kicks in, then they're going to feel it in terms of how they can build the rest of the team because it is clear you cannot win on Dak's arm alone. So, hey, whatever. Next game. Next game. Number 4 out of 6. Packers and the Saints. I thought this was so funny because for years, let me start this. Aaron Rodgers, all-time great. I never understood why they said he was the greatest thrower of the football they've ever seen. So many people say that. I think it's something great to say. I don't believe it. I don't think he's a better thrower of the football per se than a Warren Moon. I don't know that he's necessarily a better thrower of the football than John Elway, than Dan Marino. Okay, maybe Dan Marino because of he's got superior mobility, and so he can make throws on the move Marino couldn't make, but I don't think there's any throw that he can make that Elway couldn't make or that Warren Moon couldn't make. And I know these guys would beg to differ in terms of, this whole best thrower of the football ever, because you can't even chalk it up to numbers saying, well, look at all these touchdowns and he doesn't throw picks, but he also plays in an era where you can't hit the quarterback, you can't hit receivers. Like, yes, he's all-time great, but this whole greatest thrower of the football ever, nah, I don't really go for that. So that's my take. But at the end of the day, getting back to it, Aaron Rodgers, obviously we know what was going on with him. A really rough season in terms of demanding to be traded away from the Packers and almost opting to sit out and not return to play football. He'd rather retire than play there, and all the other stuff that was going on. Finally works it out with the Packers. He's on vacation in Hawaii, doesn't play in the preseason, skips some of the workouts, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we get it. Yeah, he's all time great, blah, blah, blah. All of that other stuff, all of those distractions, all of that. What did it lead to? And I'm not saying he's going to have a bad year. He's just simply too good for that. So don't even assume that that's what I'm trying to say. But what did all that lead to? Maybe it led to his worst game ever as a professional quarterback. 15 of 28, 133 passing yards, no touchdowns, and 2 picks. I don't think we've ever seen Aaron Rodgers play that bad. So, in the words of Stephen A. Smith, he's a bad man. Well, he may be that, but on Sunday he just played bad. He was terrible. And what's the cause for that? Is it all the offseason drama? Is it the fact that his focus wasn't there in terms of being as great as he's capable of being? And see, that's where, to me, Brady is going to get the nod, right? Brady don't have the physical tools like a lot of these guys, but he has an undying love, passion for the work that goes into being great, kind of Kobe-esque, right? In terms of an absolute obsession with being the best and doing everything he can do to make himself the best and try to be the best player both ever and the best player he can be, right? And so, that's where Brady is. But this is not a Brady versus Rodgers comparison. At the end of the day, I'm just saying, Rodgers, for all that offseason drama, all that look at me, I want the attention, blah, blah, blah. In my estimation, you don't get to come out and stink it up after that's the way you behave during the offseason. Part of it too, I mean, maybe Matt LaFleur, just as the head coach, maybe he didn't have those guys prepared to come out properly for the opener. I mean, you get beat 38-3 in the opener. There's just no excuse for that. Some people can say Green Bay wasn't prepared to deal with the heat, having to play in Jacksonville when the Saints had to come out and play here in Jacksonville instead of at the Superdome, obviously because of Hurricane Ida and what went on and what has gone on is continuing to go on in Louisiana as a result of that natural disaster. I don't know that there's any excuse other than those guys weren't prepared to play, and Aaron Rodgers certainly didn't appear to be prepared, and he didn't seem too bothered. But far be it from me to make any kind of judgment on where his mind was in the game. He simply had a bad game, but you don't expect games like that from guys that great. I think that's kind of where I'm going with it. Okay. Um, Flip side, the Saints, Jameis, famous Jameis. Okay. So you leave Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay wins the chip. You sit for a year beside all-time leading passer and guaranteed future first ballot Hall of Famer Drew Brees. And you say you learn a lot. You can see physically he's looking like he's in the best condition he's ever been in as a pro. Um, Sean Payton is probably a much more detailed and demanding head coach than Bruce Arians. Bruce Arians with his no risk it, no biscuit philosophy. Sean Payton is going to rail a lot of that in and get that under control. Last time we saw Jameis as a starter, I think he had like 5,000 passing yards. He had 30 touchdowns, like 32 picks or 32 touchdowns and 30 picks. But the point is he led the league in turnovers. And we've always known that he had the physical tools in terms of the big arm, the ability to stretch the field, throw the ball, make plays. But the judgment, the decision making, and part of that again is the coaching philosophy and the offensive philosophy that he was under before, led to a lot of turnovers and turnover worthy plays in the words of Pro Football Focus, right? Turnover worthy plays. But anyway, now he's with a much more detailed, disciplined coach in Sean Payton, and you see the difference immediately. Okay, so not a lot of passing yards, under 200 passing yards, but what? 5 touchdown passes to open the season. Big number, no turnovers, 0 turnovers for famous Jameis. All right, so he goes through camp, he wins the job, and he just looks so different than what we saw in his last iteration in Tampa Bay. And again, I keep saying it. It's only game 1. We've got a long way. We've got 16 more. So we're gonna see, just how much he learned and how much he's changed and how much his game has changed. And but it really was interesting to see. I mean, those type of numbers are more what you would expect from Aaron Rodgers than Jameis Winston, and you probably would have seen him with like another 100 passing yards. But the point is, Jameis tremendous opener, not trying to do too much, taking what's offered by the defense, just making the plays, being ultra efficient, playing within the scheme. All right. Sean Payton definitely, has done a really good job thus far. It's only been one game, but thus far it looked really good. He did a fantastic job of scheming this with Jameis. All right. So the last game I'm going to talk about here is going to be the Ravens and the Raiders last night. So really great Monday night game to end the week 1. And the Ravens lost in overtime. What's the biggest number from that game that stood out to me? I can tell you what it is, okay? And before I tell you that, when you think about the Ravens, what do you think about as their philosophy as a team? Defense, right? They have been a top 5 overall defensive team in the league since the year 2000, right? We know that is their calling card. The 2000 Ravens, who were the champions, arguably the greatest defense of all time. When they won in 2013, that was a more middle of the pack defense. You had an aging Ed Reed and aging Ray Lewis, but regardless, overall, for the majority of the last 2 decades, this has been a top 5, top 3, sometimes number 1 overall defensive team. We know them as being physical, as being able to lock you up, keep you from scoring, keep you from moving the ball. That's what they have made their calling card on. But that's where the number that stands out to me from last night's game is crazy. And what number is that? Derek Carr shredded that defense 34-56 passing for 435 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 pick. Let me say that again. The Ravens defense gave up 435 yards. Here's a tip. Wink Martindale, stop sending the 0 blitz, please. Stop sending 0 blitz, because the elite quarterbacks in this league, if you don't get there, they will eat you for breakfast. So you got to stop it. You look at it and so you just say, man, what's going on here? How much of it was a scheme in terms of losing that game? How much of it is the injuries? So if you hadn't heard, Ravens just seem snake bitten by injuries this season so far. You have their top 3 running backs, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, all out for the year. You have their top defensive back, Marcus Peters, also out for the year. They had their guard, second-year guard. He's out for the year. Not out for the year, but he was carted off of the field last night during the Raiders game. I mean, injury after injury is besetting these guys. The Ravens are still good enough schematically, and of course, they have Lamar Jackson, who is just a nightmare matchup for just about every team, who is going to keep you in games with his unique ability to, pick up first downs and make plays on the ground and keep defenses honest. And, he can make throws as well. So speaking of making throws, rookie wide receiver Rashad Bateman, he's out for the month of September, just injury after injury in training camp. And the preseason, and then last night, has really depleted this team. So we know football is a next man up mentality. So we can't just say, oh, well, injuries. So you gotta keep coaching, you gotta keep playing. But they have been snake bitten. But at the end of the day, it was a huge win in the opening of the new stadium in Las Vegas for the Las Vegas Raiders. A huge win for them. We'll see what they're able to do going forward. By the way, if you don't know, Max Crosby is a terror on the defensive line for the Raiders. He leads all defensive players in sacks since the 2019 season when he came into the league. I think he's got 19 now. The guy's a beast. He's really on it. Yeah, so the Raiders won the game, big win for them. John Gruden, I think, is another guy, even though he's got a 10-year deal, who is kind of being mentioned as possibly being on the hot seat. We'll find out if that's the case as the season goes on. So overall, really, you had some really good games in this first week. You had some real stinkers. I think part of that for me is, guys not playing in the preseason and not enough practice time, not enough hitting. So it's going to take some time for everything to kind of work its way through and the players to be ready. So just to give you a quick wrap up, the top 6 games for me from week 1, Bears and the Rams, Browns and the Chiefs, Cardinals and the Titans, Cowboys and Bucks, uh, Saints and Packers, and Ravens and Raiders. And quick note, Jalen Hurts looked really good. Philadelphia surprised me a lot in the way they played against Atlanta. We'll see how that keeps going on. I mean, hey, if they can continue to play this way, they got a legitimate chance because the NFC East is probably the worst division in football. So we'll see what they do. But yeah, thanks for checking in with me. If you enjoyed this pod, I already mentioned it, but just hey, take the time, click the subscribe button, click the like button, give me that thumbs up, rate and review if you can, if you feel like it. All right. Appreciate it and catch you next time.